Welcome back to Evergreen Marketing Era for Women Entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Andria Singletary, podcast strategist for women in business who want to leverage their podcast to get leads and sign clients. Okay, today's episode is really exciting. It was inspired by a question I saw on Threads. So this health coach shared that she was thinking about starting a podcast to get health coaching clients, but wanted to know if any others in her industry had been successful in using this as a strategy to grow their business. While I do talk a lot about getting clients from your podcast, I haven't talked about whether this is an effective marketing and sales platform for B2C business owners. And I see this question come up for a lot of B2C business owners. They wonder if a podcast can actually work for them when their ideal clients aren't necessarily business owners or people familiar with running a business and business strategy. And I'm not surprised that B2C business owners aren't as sure about podcasting because often when people talk about podcasting as a marketing strategy, we often think of B2B businesses. And if you're like, Andria, what are you talking about, B2C, B2B? Basically, you can think about like B2C is people who serve consumers. So think like parenting coaches, fertility coaches, health coaches. Those people are in the B2C space. And then B2B is like web designers, copywriters, that type of thing. But anyways, a lot of times when we talk about podcasting as a marketing and sales platform, we often think of B2B businesses. There's also this belief that, for B2C business owners, listeners that they get are less likely to convert because they don't want to be sold to. Now, podcasting for your business can be effective whether you are a B2B or B2C business owner. It can work for health coaches, parent coaches, life coaches, neurodivergent coaches, basically anyone in the B2C space. And I'm talking about service-based. I'm not talking about product-based businesses here. I don't work with product-based businesses, so I'm not going to speak on that. But this whole belief that people don't want to be sold to isn't true. If someone has a problem, they want someone to sell them the solution. The key, though, is to attract the people who want to get support, speak to their current reality, and show them how your offer is the solution they need. But because I love to give you the stats. Let's talk about some podcast stats. Now, these stats come from RSS.com. So about 584 million people listen to podcasts monthly. 46% of podcast listeners say that podcast ads, aka being sold to, aren't intrusive. So they don't have a problem with people selling something on their podcast. 70% of podcast listeners say they are able to recall an ad they heard on a podcast. 51% of millennials listen to podcasts for learning, lifestyle improvement, and entrepreneurship. And I include this stat just so you can see that, again, everyone isn't just listening to quote unquote business podcasts. They're looking to learn something and they're listening to podcasts that will help improve their lifestyle, which is more for like the B2C business owners. 14% of Gen X listeners tune into business, finance, and wellness podcasts. So even Gen X, while they are listening to business podcasts, they're listening to finance podcasts, and they're listening to wellness podcasts. 90% of podcasters say they listen to learn something new. And this is an important stat right here because a good majority of people, they're looking for a solution. They're looking to learn something. And you teach them something and then you position your offer like, hey, if you are wanting support with this, this is how I can support you. If you're really wanting to overcome this problem, I have the solution you need right here. So even as a B2C business owner, your podcast can be a valuable resource to listeners. You are answering the very questions they have and then giving them the solution by highlighting your offers. So if you're wondering whether a podcast can work for you just because you don't serve other business owners, the stats don't lie. And if you want to follow a simple podcast launch process and have your podcast actually set up to support your business growth, make sure you get on the waitlist for my podcast launch course, Podcast Like a Business Owner. You get the exact roadmap to starting a podcast and continuing with it after the launch. I walk you through how to set your podcast up to bring in leads and clients. Now, regardless if you serve business owners or consumers, you have to approach podcasting a certain way to move your listeners to take action. First, you have to earn their trust. I talk about this often on the podcast, but no one is going to invest in working with you if they don't trust you. And so you build trust by showing up authentically, sharing your values and beliefs, speaking on the topics that matter to your listeners, and demonstrating your expertise. This is so important. Like, you want to build that trust, you have to give them a reason to trust you. And if you don't believe me, I have some more stats for you. In 2025, 49% of podcast listeners said they feel a deeper connection to podcast hosts than other media personalities. 48% say they felt like the host could be their friend. And 43% said that podcasts allow them to truly get to know the host. Bottom line, a podcast is a great way to build that know, like, and trust factor. Like, I talk about this too, like a lot on the podcast, how your podcast can literally become part of someone's weekly routine. They make you part of their routine, whether they're listening in the car, listening while they, go for a walk, listening while they do the dishes. But each week, they know when they're going to tune into your latest episode, and they get excited about it. They're like, oh, it's Tuesday. So-and-so's episode is coming out. I can't wait. Let me, get my headphones and get my phone so I can listen. Or, oh, let me turn this on in the car while I'm driving to wherever I'm going. Like, you'll become part of their weekly routine. And that is a relationship. That is a relationship. Like, that is, and it's such a huge, huge compliment. Like, they enjoy your content so much. They enjoy learning from you so much that they look forward to listening to you each week. They feel like they have this connection to you. I still remember last year when I took off Q4 from my podcast, and like I debated on whether or not I was coming back, and I actually shared that with my email list. And I had like a few people reply like, I'm so glad you decided to bring your podcast back. I miss listening to your podcast. I became part of their routine and they were missing that. And so you really can build these connections through your podcast. Okay, second thing is you have to sell your offers in your content. And with 70% of listeners recalling an ad they hear on a podcast, you want to make sure you are actually telling your listeners about your offer. Like 70% is a huge percentage of your listeners. You want to make sure you're actually talking about your offers. But you aren't just saying, here's my offer. You need to help them see how your offer is the solution they need right now. Third thing is, do not use jargon. This is where you can really lose your listeners. You want to speak their language. You want to talk their talk. So what language are they using to describe their pain points, wants, needs, and desires? Use that language. And this is especially important if you are in like the medical field, like if you're a therapist or, something like that, where there are a lot of medical terms around like what it is that you do, the problems that your ideal clients are facing. They don't want all that medical, lingo. They don't want that because that's not how they're describing it. They don't even have that language for it. So you want to make sure that you're describing things in a way that they actually understand, how they talk about it, how they view the problem, and different things like that. And this really helps your listeners to take action because they feel seen and heard, and they know that you truly do get it. Back in episode 287, I interviewed my client, Sarah Lavelle, who, after working with me, her podcast became her main marketing and sales platform. Sarah is an executive functioning coach. And so When we first started working together, she primarily worked with neurodivergent college students and adults. Yet, despite not being a B2B business owner, she consistently signs clients from her podcast. Now, if you want to hear her full story, I will link the interview in my show notes. I've worked with other clients in the B2C space to start a podcast for their business. Parent coaches, doulas, fertility coaches, and more. And the same thing with all of them, like a podcast can truly be an effective way to reach more of your ideal clients, regardless of who it is that you serve. The key, though, is to approach podcasting like a business owner, not an influencer or a hobbyist. Like, you really have to view this platform as a marketing and sales platform. Now, if after listening to this episode, you decide you're ready to start a podcast for your business, I want to invite you to get on the waitlist for my podcast launch course, Podcast Like a Business Owner. This is the podcast launch course for business owners who want to leverage a podcast to attract their highest quality leads, grow their email list, build trust with their community, and sign more of their perfect fit clients. I walk you through everything you need to know and do to set your podcast up as a powerful marketing and sales asset for your business. Head to mamaturnedmompreneur.com/waitlist to get on the waitlist now. The link is below in the episode description and in the show notes. All right, I will catch you in the next episode.